welcome to Small Business Relief Options for Arts Organizations and Businesses. I'm Beth Yerkeside. I'm Executive Director of Triangle Artworks. For those of y'all that don't know about Triangle Artworks, first of all, welcome. We're excited always to have new people learn about our work. We are a nonprofit in the 5-county Triangle region, and the work that we do is we serve the arts community here as a business sector. What that means is that we work to increase the recognition and respect for the arts community as a business community, but it means a lot of our day-to-day work is providing the tools and training and resources that the arts community needs as businesses and to survive and thrive as businesses. And lately, like many other organizations, our work has been transferred to online. Just last week, we launched an online channel to provide tutorials and webinars, and then some information from local artists about how people are surviving and thriving in their work during this environment. And so go on Artswell TV on YouTube to find some tutorials. They're all free. We are also launched this week and have some starting, I think one's tomorrow, some very affordable webinars on things like streaming and podcasting and entrepreneurship for artists and arts organizations. So check out that on our Triangle Artworks website under upcoming events. Today's program, we're welcoming Patrick Rodriguez, whose hopefully face you can see on your screens next to mine, and Jessie Maxwell. Patrick is with the SBA, and Jessie Maxwell is with Self-Help Credit Union in Durham. And I'm very excited to have Patrick and Jessie on this call because Patrick and Jessie know Triangle Artwork, know the work we do, and therefore know the work that all of y'all do. I'm on small business groups with Jessie and Patrick. They know what we're doing, and they know the struggles that this community has. I know Patrick has attended MASH and some other Triangle Artworks events, so he has been in many room with a lot of y'all, and so they understand the work that this community does. I'm so very glad to have them as our speakers today. A few logistics before I let Patrick start. First of all, this is a webinar and not a video conference, so all of y'all are muted, all of y'all are off video. But what that means is you're not going to be able to raise your hand and ask questions. As y'all know, many of you were asked, all of you were asked to submit questions ahead of time, and we have your questions right here. Patrick and Jessie should have already seen them, and they hopefully will be addressing some of them in their remarks, and I think they will because I've heard Patrick's remarks before. But if they do not, we will be asking. These will be the first questions that we ask when once they're done with their remarks. If you have questions that come up during while they're talking or that you haven't asked yet, please put them in the Q&A, which should be at the bottom of your screen, and we will ask them at the end of the remarks. Please don't, if you've already asked a question on the document on the Google Doc, please don't ask those questions again in the Q&A. I think that's it. Oh, one, just have patience with me. This is my first time using this webinar technology. Like a lot of you are learning Zoom, so we may fumble through this a little bit, but bear with us. One other final thing, I know some of the questions that came in have been about the new unemployment benefits. And I don't think that Patrick or Jessie, I may be wrong, but I don't think they are well versed in these unemployment benefits. And Patrick's shaking his head, so no. And we recognize, Triangle Artworks recognizes that is a huge issue for a lot of people, gig workers and self-employed artists. And we are working very hard. We have been working with contacts within DES to find some information about when to apply for benefits. I know the number one, there's lots of questions about the forms, but the number one question I'm hearing is if I'm a gig artist and I'm self-employed and I can apply for the federal but not the state, when do I apply? Do I apply now? We are sort of hearing through the news media that they are saying wait till the federal guidance comes out, but that is not definitive. Our contacts within DES are telling us that pretty much everybody everybody at DES right now has their finger in the dike, and no one can pull out and do a webinar with us, but just know that we are actively working on that. So I know a lot of y'all have unemployment questions, but we're not going to be covering those today unless Jessie and Patrick have some insights that I'm not aware of. So Patrick, I'm going to turn it over to you and let you take it from here.
Sure. Okay, awesome. Thank you. Let me share my screen real quick here.
You're having more versed in this than I am, and I'm going to go mute unless anybody needs me.
Okay, I'll share the PowerPoint here. So, these are the 5 programs that SBA currently has available to small businesses and nonprofits for disaster relief. So I'll just kind of highlight them, and then I'll go back in depth. But the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program is the program that most people know that the SBA provides to small businesses and nonprofits during times of disaster. So those, mostly hurricanes here in North Carolina. You go onto the SBA loan portal, which is up and running. It's been up for the last 3 weeks, and you apply directly to the SBA, and the SBA through the Treasury gives small businesses and nonprofits disaster loans, which can go up to 30 years in their term. And currently the interest rate's 3.75% for for-profits, and then 2.75% for nonprofits. And so that's, in general, that's what it is. And there's no payments for 12 months, so you don't have to pay any of those loan proceeds back, principal or interest, for a time of 12 months. And it can be used for almost anything that your business needs, mostly like working capital, salary, accounts payable, payroll, fixed debts, and other bills that you can't pay due to the current disaster. And that disaster period started January 31st, and the application's open until December 18th. So people are applying right now and have their loans in the queue already. And something that just came out recently, though, was the Economic Injury Grant, which is through the same portal as the disaster loan. So you would go on to the disaster loan portal, and in one of the last screens, you'll see, would you like a $10,000 advance? And I think it says grant too, but that's where you would apply for the Economic Injury Grant of up to $10,000. And that would be hopefully dispersed within a matter of days, whereas the Economic Injury Loan is going to take anywhere from 8 to 21 days to process. So that's going to take a little bit longer. And then moving on to the Express Bridge, that is a very, not a very well, widely used, I should say, program, because it's mostly during times of disaster. And secondly, you have to have an existing relationship with an express lender to apply. So it is kind of being eclipsed by the Paycheck Protection Program right now, because that program has loan forgiveness and the Express Bridge doesn't. So the Express Bridge is much like the NC Rapid Recovery, where you get immediate up to $25,000 an emergency loan, and then it can be paid back by the disaster loan. So that's most of the time, that's what the use is for. But now that we have the Paycheck Protection Program, I'll focus on that. And then the small business debt relief, I'll just mention right now, because it's so if you're a current, if you want to talk about that, Jessie, if you're a current SBA borrower, SBA will pay the principal and interest for up to 6 months on your current SBA loans. And if you're a new SBA borrower, we'll pay the principal and interest up till September 27th. for any new SBA loans made in that time frame. So, but the big news of the week is the Paycheck Protection Program. I'll go over to the slide that talks about that. It is passed. It was passed in the CARES Act, and it has $349 billion set aside by Congress, mainly to be used for payroll and rent, utilities, and mortgage interest. And if you use it on payroll, those uses will be that portion of the loan will be forgiven. So it's a pretty interesting program. Like I said, it's been in the news quite a lot. But the basics of it is that there's no collateral requirement, no personal guarantee, and no SBA fees. So those are the three big points to take away. And on the lender side, it's 100% guaranteed from the SBA. So I'll let Jessie kind of talk about how they're handling it. But the SBA is telling the lenders to forgive the portion that's used for 2 months of payroll. So if you pay your employees up to 2 months using this PPP program, that portion will be forgiven. And then you can use the remainder for rent, utilities, and mortgage interest. So this program is going through third-party SBA lenders. So you will not go to the SBA direct to take out a loan. You would go to an SBA lender like Self-Help or other lenders out there to apply. And the application's on the Treasury website. It's also on the SBA website. And there's a lot of additional information on the SBA website, like frequently asked questions to guide people in figuring out what counts as payroll. Because that's been the majority of questions I've answered, is what counts as payroll. And there's a whole rabbit hole of questions that you can go down regarding payroll and what counts as payroll. So I'll leave that maybe the Q&A portion. So in the big scheme of things, so the lenders, just to give you a kind of step back just for a minute, but I think you've seen in the news that like Wells Fargo's kind of been hammered recently. You know, they opened up their lending on Saturday morning, and by Sunday morning, Monday morning, their allocation, their cap had been reached, I think, of $10 billion. So what I've heard and read in the news, this is kind of, you know, on my own kind of, you know, research here, is that the Federal Reserve will be buying the PPP loans off of the lenders now to help replace that liquidity that's going to be going out the door in the next few days. So hopefully, as these big banks reach their cap, they'll offload some of that to the Federal Reserve and maybe even sell it on the secondary market, and then we'll be able to re-lend. But for lenders like Self-Help and community banks and credit unions, they're just kind of ramping up and starting, and some of them have already been lending through PPP. But it takes them a little while for non-SBA lenders to get in to the program, because they have to learn how to use the SBA software. They got to get their software talking with the SBA software. They have to hire loan officers to process these. And so it's a matter of just bandwidth and getting it ramping up to be able to make these loans, which I hope we'll see in the next coming days and weeks. And then in addition, I think they're even talking about making more money. The administration is going back to Congress to make more money available, asking for another $200 billion for this program. So as of yesterday, I heard $100 billion had been allocated out of the 350, and that was just in the first 3 days, so or 5, maybe 4 days. But then April 3rd was the opening date for small businesses to apply. April 10th is when sole proprietors and independent contractors can apply. So come Friday, you're going to have another wave of applicants. 1099s and sole proprietors are going to be applying, and we'll see how that next round goes. So I'll just go back over. This is what the application. I'm going to swing back over, pivot to the disaster loan. So if you're going to take out a disaster loan from the SBA, this is what the application looks like. It takes about 15 minutes to fill out. Ask if you're under 500 employees. Ask general eligibility questions like, are you, you're not engaged in any illegal activity, right? That's one of the good, things you want to check off. You own more than 50% of the company. And then it's going to ask for your legal business name, your trade name, your EIN for corporations and LLCs, and it'll ask for social security numbers for sole proprietors. It'll ask if you're a nonprofit. So you want to check yes right there if you're a nonprofit. Now, the trouble comes in the next section. So if you're a nonprofit, you don't own the business per se, right? So as executive director of a nonprofit, you don't own the nonprofit. So in the business owner box, you're going to kind of come to a conundrum here when it says percent ownership. So you're going to just want to put 100% as the executive director, and then they're going to call you back and they're going to get you some more information on how to fill out additional documents. But just put that you're 100% owner, put your email, put your information in there, and then they will contact you with additional docs you need to fill out as a nonprofit. But that's a big piece of the puzzle there. And then it'll ask you for any felonies, or you've committed felonies or whatever. It's, no, hopefully. And then at the very end, you'll put your, if anyone's helped you fill out the application, you put their information in, and then you'll put your bank information in, because all these funds will be direct deposited. And this is where you're going to check off, I would like to be considered for an advance of up to 10,000. You're going to check that box right there, and that will put you in the queue for the $10,000 grant. So no matter if you get accepted or denied the loan, you will still receive the grant, and that will be a grant, not a loan. And if you were on the website before the grant was available, we're telling people to go back to the application, to this application online, and fill it out again, and make sure you check the box and resend it. And you'll have 2 applications in the pipeline, one for the grant, one for the loan, and they won't interfere with each other. So you should be able to get both.
Patrick, can I ask a really quick question? What are the terms of these loans?
So the term of the disaster loan is up to 30 years. And the interest rate for nonprofits is 2.75. So you may end up getting a loan offer. So you're going to get a call from a loan officer from the processing center. And they're going to say, this is what we think is going to keep you going for 6 months. 6 months of working capital. It's about the average they're offering. And if you take that amount, if you accept it and it's dispersed, and you don't need it, you can pay it back, no prepayment penalty. If they offer it to you and you don't take it, that's fine as well. There's no requirement that you take the offer. There's no cost to apply. And like I said, the payments are deferred for 12 months. So you could take the money, have it on your account, your balance sheet, and not have to pay any principal and interest for 12 months on that amount. So it's very flexible, and it's meant to be used for payroll, accounts payable, fixed debts, and other bills that you may have. So it's very open-ended. Now, if you take the payroll protection program and you get a loan out of there, the only restriction is that you don't use the economic injury disaster loan for the same payroll. So just don't use it for the same purpose and you'll be fine. There's the website for the application for the disaster loan. And that's the 1-800 number, 1-800-659-2955 to call about your application if you have any questions. Or you can send an email to disastercustomerservice@sba.gov. We have an East Coast Servicing Center and a West Coast Center. So anything east of the Mississippi is handled by that side, and the other side is handled by the West Coast Center. And then we have folks from FEMA tasked to us. So we got 500 people from FEMA over there working at the call center and the loan app center. We've ramped up hiring for loan officers for both centers as well. So there's people being hired daily to come over there and work. Mostly retired federal employees are coming back to do this. So it's up and running pretty much full steam right now. And I mentioned that. So yeah, I'll kind of take a break, and maybe if Jessie, do you want to take over and talk about what you guys are doing? And
sure. One, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, and I'll stop sharing there.
Great. And then two, I will see if I can share my screen. Zoom folks, so I'm Patrick Rodriguez 2 today, but I'm actually Jessie Maxwell. You can't hear me?
We can hear you, you can't hear me. But yeah, this is Jessie Maxwell. I have no idea why it says Patrick Rodriguez, but you just go down and share your screen. You're good.
Okay. No, that is because Patrick generously shared his login information with me, because I want to be like him. Let me share my screen and we'll see what pops up. Let's do this one. Share and wait for it. All right. So I just want to follow up on a couple of things that Patrick mentioned and also allow for some space in case some details have changed over the last couple of weeks. So we've been trying to keep track of that. So just a quick disclaimer, this presentation is not necessarily 100% comprehensive. So there might be some details that have been omitted. So I highly recommend that after this, if you have further questions that we don't answer, even though I know there's a running list of questions going on that Beth is compiling that we will absolutely answer in writing and in this presentation. But to definitely just go visit those websites, the SBA website, and then a touch on some unemployment at the end, just to verify some of these details, because those are the two places where everything is 100% up to date. I like to think this presentation is also up to date, but that's my disclaimer. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about the Paycheck Protection Program, just some of those nuts and bolts that I know that people are having questions about down below, and then touch on a few other things to be thinking about, especially as a sole proprietor or nonprofit or contractor during this time. So a quick and dirty on the Paycheck Protection Program. I think what's really important to keep in mind is that the purpose is to help keep employees on payroll. And if you're a sole proprietor or an independent contractor, that person you're hoping to keep on payroll is yourself. So that's sort of the spirit of this program. You can qualify for 2.5 times the average monthly payroll from the last year, which can be calculated as either 2019, like on your tax returns, or the last 12 months. Another way to explain that is you can do up to 2 months of your average monthly payroll costs from the last year, plus an additional 25% of that amount is how much you can qualify for. I know a lot of folks think immediately like, how much can I get? I'm going to get that much. But I think it's also really important to consider the forgiveness portion of this. So there's that flip side that you want to make sure you're doing that math as well. And that's how much of the loan can be forgiven. And that would be at least 75% of the funds that you were awarded are used for payroll and benefits, And then the other 25% can be used for other qualifying expenses like interest on your mortgage obligations, rent, and utilities. And there's some minor stipulations with those. Then the loan can be forgiven. If the funds are being used for other purposes, which that may end up happening, which is fine, then that will actually roll into a term loan that has an interest rate of 1% and a term of 2 years. So again, an example of when you would have to repay the loan, if you use a portion of the money for anything other than the approved uses over the 8 weeks after getting the loan, that's a key time frame, then the portion used for the non-approved purposes turns into a term loan. Or, and I don't know how much this is necessarily the case, because I know we've got a lot of sole proprietors and independent contractors here, but for the nonprofits there, if you do decrease the full-time employment headcount and or salaries and wages by more than 25%, that also would trigger a term repayment. I do also want to clarify that this is a 1% interest rate over 2 years. Again, I've included the website to go ahead and look that. So then what does this look like in real life, right? So we've given you all of these things in these websites. So what you need to do is if you're interested in a Paycheck Protection Program loan, like Patrick said, you have to go through a lender. Right now it's the ones that already have that SBA connection. So you want to reach out to your bank or credit union where you have a banking relationship. If you happen to have more than one banking relationship, prioritize the institution where you have a business banking relationship or a lending relationship. I'm saying that because, as Patrick mentioned, this is a highly, highly popular program, and banks and credit unions are being inundated with requests. In order to be able to serve as many people as possible, a lot of institutions are instituting. There we go. A lot of institutions are having a different rollout, right? So they'll hit a certain group of people first, and then another group of people, and then another group of people. And a lot of our institutions are prioritizing lending relationships and business banking relationships first. The program becomes available to sole proprietors and contractors on Friday. So none of you who are those have necessarily missed the boat there. So there's a whole nother wave of potential applications. I do want to flag that just given volume, just because you submit your application to the bank does not mean that it's fully submitted and you're good to go. It means that on the back end, the bank then has to submit to the SBA on your behalf, and then hear back from the SBA and then get back with you to get the closing documents. So it's just a matter of patience, and these can take a couple of weeks. And this is not going to be something as in your bank account in 2 or 3 days. So I think just sort of setting those expectations are pretty key. If you are working with some of actually anybody, if you're working with any bank in particular, I would 100% ask about sort of where your application is in the process or in line to be processed, because I think it's really important to note whether you're sort of at the bottom of the list or in the middle of the list, just so that you can have some expectation around timing. Just for context, this is what self-help is asking our Paycheck Protection borrowers to prepare for the application. Other banks may have slightly different requests, but generally speaking, it's going to be the same. So if we're looking for payroll tax records as applicable, because some of these aren't necessarily applicable to everyone. You're a Form 941, or if you're independent contractors, your 1099s, or if you're a sole proprietor, your Schedule C, and then supporting income and expense forms. Your current number of employees, this can be a little bit tricky. So we're looking for FTEs, full-time equivalent employees. An FTE is based on a 40-hour work week. So 40 hours of work would be 1 FTE. 2 part-time employees, so 2 people that work 20 hours would be 1 FTE. So just thinking about that math, because it's not necessarily top of mind. For for-profits, again, we're just looking for information from each owner who has over 20% ownership. And for nonprofits, we're looking for just 1 director's information, usually the executive director. And Patrick showed you on some of the forms where that's going in. Okay, so you've applied, you've sent your information into the bank. What happens now? So now it's the black box of the bank taking over stuff for you. You're going to submit your application and the required documents. Your bank or credit union is going to review that for completion. Some may be a little more thorough, some may be less thorough. That process is really up to your bank. Self-help, we're looking to see that you have all the boxes checked and that there are no egregious errors. If all the boxes aren't checked, or if there is an error with your application that we catch, it doesn't necessarily mean an automatic loan denial. It just means that process is going to slow down quite a bit because it has to get taken out of the line, sent back to you, corrected, and put back in. So we highly, highly recommend that people reach out with questions if they have those. Then we submit to the SBA. The SBA has a couple of days to review and approve or deny the application. Then if it's approved, they get back to us, they share a loan number, and then we require you to submit forms and closing documents. Once we have all of that information, we have 5 business days from the receipt to close. Most banks are looking to do that a little bit faster. Once it's closed, we wire you the money. But again, that's a lot of different steps from a lot of different parties. And while it's fairly well coordinated, it does take some time. So again, just creating that expectation around timing for when you can receive the money. What if you don't have 2 weeks or 3 weeks? What if you need the money ASAP? This is where I would go back to what Patrick was saying and consider an emergency economic injury grant. This you can apply directly through the SBA. I think Patrick went over a lot of these details. I think it is important to note that even though it's the same portal for application, if you are approved for an EIDL, a full EIDL loan, there is no obligation for you to take that loan. If you have an emergency grant and then you later accept a PPP, the amount of the emergency grant will be subtracted from the amount forgiven under the PPP, which is basically just making sure that you don't get duplicate forgiveness. Let's see if, okay, so great, we have all of these SBA resources. What else can you do? Because there are things that you can be doing to help in this time that don't have to do with relief programs. So in addition to checking out the federal options, make sure that you're staying up to date on your local resources. Chambers of Commerce and local economic development organizations are all across the state are doing a phenomenal job of compiling ongoing lists of resources, both grant resources and loan opportunities. Reach out to your financial institutions, both your personal financial institutions and your business financial institutions. It is really important right now to make sure that you're staying in touch and keeping people abreast of where you are and what your issues are. We have strongly encouraged our borrowers. In fact, we've actually reached out to almost all of our borrowers to check in, see how they're doing. Is there anything that we can do? If we have a lending relationship, can we be flexible on the lending front? Most lenders are working with that. A lot of it would also be worth talking to your credit card company too. See where there's some flexibility. Everybody's in a tough boat right now, so this is a good time to be asking for that kind of grace. Contact your insurance provider if that's applicable. The likelihood that COVID-related injuries or closures will be covered under insurance is low, but you never know, and it's always worth asking. Make sure you're in touch with as I mentioned, your lenders, utility service providers, landlords, just so that more communication in this case is better than less. And then also be very wary of scams, because unfortunately there are a lot of those out there. So I just want to highlight that. There are student loan forbearance options if you're thinking on a personal level, because for a lot of us, the small businesses, how your business is doing directly impacts how you're doing personally. And so thinking about this as a big picture, if you need financial or housing counseling, there are options there. I'll talk about some of the unemployment stuff in a little bit. Some really great online resources that I highly recommend, I've listed below. CASE out of Fuqua has this worldwide searchable database. NC Growth has a slightly more manageable searchable database. And then the Economic Development Partnership of North Carolina also has a resource roundup. So there's some places to go. Those are being updated regularly just to keep in touch with what your options are out there from a grant and loan and information perspective. And then do everything possible to avoid payday lenders, especially in this environment. It's not a great first step. So Beth, I know you mentioned earlier that you weren't able to get someone from the Division of Employment Security.
Yeah, so anything you want to add, we'd appreciate it.
Yeah, well, I want to caution this with, I am not an unemployment insurance expert by any means, but I do want to flag the DES website, because they've done a really great job of breaking down FAQs, and there are 2 different documents for a step-by-step guide of how to apply. And the website actually does say that if you're a sole proprietor or contractor, to go ahead and get your stuff in. They can't do anything with it until they have guidance on how to deal with that.
I think there's also a point, what I'm hearing, and I think some of the people are on the line that were asking these questions, but what I'm hearing is there's a point you get to in the application, if you're a sole proprietor, that there's not a proper answer. So I think they're working on new forms.
Okay, that's great to know. Yeah, but just to highlight the federal unemployment, the expansion of the unemployment is hugely essential and important, and is going to be vital for a lot of sole proprietors and contractors. And so they just expanding the eligibility, the additional 600 weeks in benefits on top of the current levels, and expanding the length of time that you can file and claim. This slide just sort of outlines that in more official language and gives you some date parameters, but again, I've included that link. And then just specifically, I know there's been a little bit of confusion in wake of the executive order for the waiting period, where they made a big deal about the 1 week waiting period being waived. That doesn't waive the 10-day period that your former employer has, and or that processing time that goes. That's just so there's still going to be a gap between when you apply and when you actually get your benefits. And that's kind of all I have really on that front. I want to take a minute and breathe and give a chance for people to ask questions, or are we collecting questions and following up later? What's your best guidance, Beth?
I'm sorry, are we asking questions to me? I was looking at questions, Q&As.
No, I was going to say, should we just start some Q&A now, or are there? Okay.
There are people flagging me. Yes, that would be great. Patrick, do you have anything to add? Want to get Patrick back on?
I'm going to see if
No, not right now.
There we go.
Okay. Okay, so I'm going to go to the questions that were submitted earlier first. And the first one was about is there a prohibition against foreign ownership of a company that applies for PPP? And if so, because they don't have a EIN or tax ID.
I'm deferring to Patrick on that one.
So
But
foreign ownership, I'll have to check. I didn't see anything in there I can forward you the actual act if you want to read through it, because it'll talk about foreign ownership stuff, but I haven't read specifically on foreign ownership. I don't think that is a problem for this program. For the economic injury disaster loan, that is somewhat of a problem, but I'll say problem, but there are rules for foreign ownership. Folks have to be here with temporary residency or permanent residency. And it's just that you don't want to issue a 30-year term loan on the economic injury disaster loan to somebody who's only going to be here for a couple of years. So, but since the payroll protection program is basically a very short-term vehicle, I'll have to double check on the foreign ownership question. I don't know that off.
All right, and we got a couple questions that are sort of interrelated about because of the issue y'all identified earlier, that for some of these loans, the payroll is essentially you if you're a sole proprietor or if you're a very small business. And so they're saying that the rules for the PPP program define income as payroll costs for sole proprietors or independent contractors, when in fact, often there's not a clear payroll. It's more the service the payroll is actually the service. How do they, for instance, one said, we're an American company that offers writing workshops in France and Italy, and really they're not taking much in the way of salary. It's more in the, getting paid for the service. And we got a couple questions about that. So what is, if cost of goods sold, is that the cost of providing service? How do you resolve those issues?
Yeah, so if you're a pure service company, and there are pure service companies, you'll have zero cost of goods sold because you're not making anything tangible per se, a product, but you're still going to have a line item for gross revenue. So that'll be, you'll be able to fill that in for the economic injury disaster loan to give the SBA an idea of what your revenue is. So it's gross revenue minus cost of goods sold, net revenue. So it's just another way of finding out what your net revenue is.
Okay. Jessie, I don't know if you know the answer to this question, but I will ask it because people are asking unemployment questions, which is how do you prove unemployment when your income is irregular anyway, which is going to be an issue for a lot of gig workers.
So they look at what they call your base, and that's usually looking at the last 5 quarters of income, and so that's how they derive what your presumed income would be, understanding that there could be some fluctuation there. The exact calculation, I do not know, but I do know that we're looking back at 5 quarters to be able to come up with sort of what your income would be, and then also prove what that reduction in income would be. But right. Yeah, it's more of an average gain.
But so if you're considered unemployed, if you're a gig worker, and I see a lot of people asking this, it's like some people are trying to continue some form of work. But so they stop working altogether?
No. Okay. The expansion of this accounts for a reduction in employment. Okay. So there'll be sort of I can send the exact language, but generally you can earn up to 20% of what the unemployment would be giving you and still get the unemployment benefits. Okay. So if your unemployment benefit is $100 a week, these are really low numbers just for the sake of math, because if you're getting $100 a week in unemployment, you can still be working and earn $20 a week and still get that $100 a week. If you're working and earning $40 a week, then you only get $80 a week from unemployment. Yeah. Those numbers are established and gauged on, again, your base or what your prior earning record is. So it will take into account a reduction in hours, and you can get some makeup on that one. Does that clear? That's still a pretty vague answer, but does that clarify that that is a possibility?
Yes, I think okay. So. I hope so. Back to the PPP and the EIDL, the disaster loans. I know a lot of people who work in the arts have multiple gigs. That is, they have multiple companies. They may have a teaching program, but they may have a performance program. And if they're filing different Schedule Cs for these different sort of businesses, do they have, they have more than one sole proprietorship? Do they file together? Do they file 2 separate applications for unemployment or PPP or EIDL? So this says, if I'm calculating my average monthly income from, say, 2019 total gross, do I think about both sole proprietorships or do I do it separately? Do you understand that? You're mute, Patrick.
You're on mute, Patrick.
Patrick, you're muted.
So for the economic injury disaster loan, they would apply per entity. So per corporation, per sole proprietorship for the economic injury disaster loan. And for the PPP, Jessie, what would your recommendation be per business entity?
Can you repeat the question? I apologize. I was updating a web link.
People who have multiple sole proprietorships and are filing multiple Schedule Cs. Like someone has 2 sole proprietorships and they've filed 2 Schedule Cs. Should they, for the unemployment or the loan, should they use both together or separately in their income calculations? Does that make sense?
Yes, my default answer is use them together, but I want to confirm that.
Okay.
We have that in the guidance.
Okay. All right, let me switch to the Q&A questions. One of those I think we've answered. So what is the total available for the economic injury grant? Is that the same as the emergency advance? I think that's yes. So what does a nonprofit do if they don't have a lending relationship with a bank or your bank doesn't do SBA? How do you apply?
I would recommend, I'll send you a list of active SBA lenders, but I'm pretty confident that lenders are going to come. Like, so for instance, just like 10 minutes ago, SBA, there was a bulletin saying that Wells Fargo has their asset cap removed. So now they can do more PPP loans. So that just happened 10 minutes ago. So they might be out there starting up their PPP lending. But other lenders will start coming online, lending through PPP because there's 100% guarantee, and there's some commissions there for them as well. So it makes sense for them to join. Plus it's customer centric. So if now's the time to gain your, some market share by doing these loans to small businesses. So if your competition is not doing these loans and you have a kind of a dissatisfied or disgruntled customer, now's the time to go out there and look for those folks and bring them on into your bank, your lending institution. So I'm pretty confident there's going to be a lot of lenders out there using the PPP loan to help small businesses. So I'll send you the active lender list.
Okay.
It's got about 130 lenders in North Carolina that are doing SBA loans.
Right. And in addition to some of the websites that y'all have mentioned, and we'll be loading this webinar on Artswell TV later, hopefully today, but we also on our homepage of our website and our blog have a list of resources, which is all the links to all the loan options and lots of other things. So people can look there. Some of the other questions I think have been answered. For instance, can you apply to the economic injury grant without applying to the loan? Even if it's through the same portal, I think you said you would just go into the loan application, click, yes, I want the advance. And then you can, I guess, turn down the loan, right, Patrick? Isn't that what?
Yeah, I mean, if you just want the grant, you can just fill it out. You can fill it out as if you want the loan too, but if it's offered to you, I would say that would not be the way to approach the application. The way to approach the application would be to think that I'm going to fill out the loan application, the disaster loan application, as if I need it. And I'm going to make sure I select the $10,000 grant. And when that process runs its course and they offer you the disaster loan, when and if, right? Probably they would. Then you can deny, you don't have to take the funds. It can just sit there and you don't have to touch it. But at least you know that it's there in case you need it.
You've already applied for it, right?
Applied for it, it's been in the queue, it's gone through the process, it's there if you need it.
Because who knows where we're going with all this. So nonprofits are asking, if I put 0% of ownership, does that make us ineligible? I think you said, no, that's just the way to do it. How do they calculate working capital and the disaster loan amount?
It's about 6 months.
Okay.
That's about a ballpark amount they're gonna look to give you to keep you in operations, keep your doors open.
Okay. And Dan Ellison asking, forget the website. We'll look on our website. We will have those. They're already up actually in our disaster relief information blog post. Okay. We got, just to clarify, did Patrick say you could apply for it and get both PPP and EIDL?
Yes, you can apply for both.
Okay.
And you can apply for PPP and then EIDL, or you can apply for EIDL and then PPP. It doesn't matter the order. You just can't use the proceeds for the same thing. So you can't use the EIDL money for payroll if you take out a PPP loan.
Okay. And then there's a question about going to the SBA website for the PPP application, but there's not a fillable application. And that would be because the PPP applications are with your bank, correct?
Yeah, so you can go online and download the PDF document for the form, but you're going to take that to the bank and submit it through the lender.
Right. And
credit union.
So yeah, just for reference, we actually have an online portal set up. So the questions are the same and the documents the same, but our borrowers are putting stuff in online.
Right. In other words, don't drop it off in the drive-through, or can they drop it off in the drive-through?
I have heard of banks that are taking paper applications actually. So I don't know if that's still the case, but on Friday and Monday, some of them were.
So yeah, I think you would probably prefer online if possible. Yes.
We won't take a paper application.
Well, there's a question. So if you get PPP, both PPP and emergency loans, can you use both for payroll as long as the PPP goes for first 2 months and emergency loan is for the next 4 months?
Say that again?
That could work.
If you get PPP, if you get both a PPP and an emergency loan, can you use both for payroll if the PPP goes for the first 2 months and the emergency is used for the next 4 months?
Yes, correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I think we know the question about PPP, but for sole proprietors, what constitutes payroll? Says normally I deposit business check to the business account and pay myself by writing a check to my personal account. But so I think we talked about this a little bit before about how to calculate how you're paying if you're a sole proprietor. Y'all have anything to add?
No.
How does this affect co-ops? If they're a for-profit artist-owned gallery with 21 owners? Have y'all run into that question? Co-ops?
I have not.
Business.
If they're a business, they're going to be eligible. So
would you?
Yeah,
I guess one of the questions is, who do you put in there as the owner? Like for a nonprofit, y'all are saying,
yeah,
put in one of the quote unquote owners.
Yeah. And this is under the PPP. Are you talking about?
Or EIDL, or both.
It doesn't say.
Yeah. So I would just recommend that, someone, maybe the director or co-op leader, submit for the economic injury. And then the FAQs on the SBA website right now that I sent over to you say that the bank can accept kind of like their designated representative. So if you have folks under 20% threshold of ownership, as long as they're kind of like the business entity's designated agent, they can apply and can go through that designated agent / representative. They don't have to have all 100 co-op members sign the loan. They can just take that one signature of the designated agent and take that loan document and submit it.
Right, that makes sense. For PPP, how do you calculate full-time employees if most are part-timers?
40 hours.
Pardon?
40 hours is an FTE, a full-time employee or a full-time equivalent.
So if you're
So if you have if you have 2 part-timers that are working 20 hours each, that's 1 FTE.
okay. So if you don't, so if it's a very small business, no one's working, full 40 hours even accumulated, I guess can you apply or?
I'm going to assume yes.
Yeah. Well, that'd be a question to ask your bank.
Beth, I'm gonna have to get off in just a second. So I just want to say thanks. If you have any questions for the membership, if you want, you can email me directly, or you can email, I don't know, Beth, if you want to collate some of the emails or questions.
Yeah, Jessie, if you could stay on for a couple of minutes, there are some other questions, but a lot of them are getting sort of repetitive, so I think it'll be fairly quick. And a lot of them are, is this going to be available online? And the answer is yes. But Patrick, thank you. And send me anything you've got, and I will put it on our resources page.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Jessie.
Thanks.
You have another couple minutes? I think it'll be pretty quick.
Yeah, I do have a couple minutes, and I also,
have
I'm
enough?
taking notes on some of these questions that I want to follow up on. So with the FTE piece, especially when you're starting to look at being a contractor or sole proprietor, and you're to qualify for the Paycheck Protection Program, that's where some of the things get iffy. I know that the PPP application, as it is posted right now, is primarily intended for small businesses and hasn't been adjusted to reflect some of the nuances that a sole proprietor or a contractor is going to have when they apply. So I do want to catch that we are expecting a revised document to come down from the SBA from the application standpoint, but should that not happen, or should that be delayed before Friday, I can get that FTE answer, especially if it's a smaller organization.
Thank you. That would be very helpful. There are no more questions about PPP and payroll, and particularly, and I know these questions came up at the chamber program that Patrick did, but where you're essentially covering 10 weeks of payroll, and the requirements that you not reduce payroll, but there are some people, especially in these small organizations, who will begin applying for unemployment benefits and actually may be able to get, in some cases, more from unemployment than they may get working for you. How long do you have to keep your head count up?
2 months. So there you have really, the PPP is looking at the 2 months following your loan approval and making sure that again, the intent is to keep people on payroll.
Right.
So that's what we're looking at. If there's a reduction in FTE headcount and or a reduction in overall salaries more than 25%, that's when all of a sudden it's like, okay, well, either you're in dire straits or you're not sort of along with the intent of the program. The understanding that a lot of businesses and just people in general have had to reduce hours or let people go before this program has even become available.
Right.
The SBA put in, sorry, I'm pulling this up so I can get it. You have until June 30th to restore all of the FTE and salary levels. So remember how the amount of the loan that you can qualify for is based on your average payroll from all of 2019, or if you should choose to do it the last 12 months. Mm-hmm. So we're looking at an average here. So if in the after February 15th, you had to let people go between February 15th and April 26th, the program accounts for the fact that, okay, we know that you're making decisions that you had to make in order to survive. We're going to give this extra time on the back end up until June 30th to restore that payroll using these funds to help do that. Okay. Whether or not, in terms of, I think the underlying question of, is it better to use the Paycheck Protection Program and keep my employees on, or give them an official severance so that they can qualify for all of the unemployment benefits? That's not an answer that I'm going to be able to give. That depends on everyone's business and preferences, and that's a case-by-case basis. But I do want to highlight that that's a pro and con thing to be weighing as a business owner.
Well, I will also say, if y'all listeners have questions, and I understand Jessie's situation, she can't give you advice. However, if you go on our website, on our resources page on our homepage, there are local organizations that will meet with you and help counsel you, like the SBTDC, the Small Business Network counselors. There are a lot of local councils that will meet with you and counsel you for free. And we have those organizations linked on our website. So let me roll through these. How does a sole proprietor decide whether to apply to PPP or unemployment, since PPP assumes continued employment? You've already addressed that a little bit, that you can't continue to be employed somewhat.
I also want to highlight, and Beth, you likely have this on the website, and I haven't checked y'all's website in a bit, but the SBTDC and the SBC, they recently had a webinar specifically about unemployment insurance and what that and those benefits and what that looks like. And I think there's another one that's also coming up. And I know those are recorded, so that might also be an interesting place to listen and try and get some perspective around that.
Okay, we are running out of time, and I'm rolling through these really quickly. I think a number of them. So a question about this one hadn't come up, sort of, we're a two-person LLC partnership. Are we a small business or a sole proprietorship? Different rules seem to apply. So the Washington Post said 2 days ago, the SBA has not yet issued guidance on small partnerships. Do you know how that's being treated?
I don't know if the guidance has changed in the last 2 days. I do know that we're getting waves of additional guidance as things work their way out. The general consensus is however you report to the IRS is how you're going to have to report for these programs.
Okay.
The forms that you submit, the entity that you take.
Okay. Another question that you may have some insights on, although I don't think you can be definitive, but and I've heard this before, that, it's the question of, I went to our bank and they say we don't have, we find the question again, sorry.
No, it's fine.
The people going to their banks, and where did it go? Almost, so the banks that we've tried to get to do a PPP loan refuse to work with us because they're making, bless you, they're making our own customers a priority. Our bank is not an SBA lender. And I know Patrick said that more are coming online, but any thoughts on, developing a new relationship or what they should do?
Yeah. And this is also a great opportunity this is going to be a slight sales plug, but also just general good advice. Like if you are feeling like you're not being served by your financial institution, this is a good opportunity to sort of reevaluate where your values align and find an institution that has similarly aligned values. There are a bunch of different options out there. I'm going to take a step back for a little bit and just provide some context. I know we're running out of time, and then give some possible steps forward. So one, the fact that, just for like big picture context, the fact that this policy was passed and then a week later implemented nationally is unprecedented. Like the amount of coordination and getting things online and getting things going and getting everybody on the right way and working on different waves of guidance that are coming in, and some might be conflicting with the other. So we really are sort of building the bike as we're riding. But I have been very impressed with the ability for everybody to sort of gather in and go. That said, because of the sort of speed, a lot of banks are doing, just like self-help has been doing, sort of a tiered approach to who they can help and when. And that's one, to manage workload. That's also to make sure that, yes, some of those key relationships are being served. Pros of that, banks are looking out for the interests of their higher priority customers. Cons of that is that we've got a lot of folks that get left out, and or you've got people that are banking with non-SBA institute or non-7A lenders. So what do you do about that? That is a strongly acknowledged piece. One, there is that list of lenders that are doing these programs that people can go to. The other piece is, again, asking around. Like if you don't have a banking relationship with someone, you can ask around. What self-help is doing, just for context, is we have a link on our website. If you go to selfhelp.com/PPP, you can fill out your contact information. So we are offering the program in waves. So we did start with our borrowers and tenants, and then are moving into our members, and then are moving into other organizations. And what we do is we take in all of your requests for information. We'll reach out initially to give you an overview of where we are and what we're doing. And then when we're like, okay, we're ready to take your application, we will send another email for that, which seems slightly impersonal, but it's a way to make sure that we can get through as many applications as possible and expand the program as quickly as possible. A lot of other banks and institutions are doing that, which is why I want to go back to what I mentioned in a slide earlier, was that when you're talking to folks, try and get an idea of where you are in the line. An off-the-record piece of advice, so this is not written down anywhere, but you will not be penalized for trying to get a payment protection program loan through more than one lender. That's not to say you should go out and apply to 8 different, because that's, from a workload perspective, that's not fair or equitable. But if you're scrambling to find someone to do your loan, put yourself in the queue in a couple of different places. There's a back-end reconciliation process at the SBA, so that before you're awarded any money, there's a check to make sure that there are no duplicate applications. And if there are, they get canceled. So
right.
do what you will.
Thank you. That's absolutely what I think information need to get out there. 2 final things, and I'm not answering all of these questions because we're running out of time, but a couple things that people wanted to clarify. And I think we talked about it a little bit, but if we just apparently didn't, people are still confused. One is a definition of working capital. You know what do y'all mean when you say working capital?
It would generally be 6 months of your operating expenses.
Okay. And then, go ahead.
I want to say I can pull up that's outlined exactly what that means, so I can pull that up.
And then there are still some questions about sort of what constitutes payroll for sole proprietors. And I know that's going to be a continuing question we're going to hear, because because I'd say the majority of the community we serve are nonprofits, small nonprofits, large nonprofits, and sole proprietors or gig workers. And so how do they figure out, which things that I pay out of the money I normally make would count as payroll and which would not? Any guidance on, or is there any guidance out there where we can send them, or do you have any thoughts on how they can figure that out?
Yes, I want to, just in the interest of time, pause and say that I can send you guidance for you to send out so that it's written down.
That would be awesome. I think that is it. I think everything else has been sort of covered a little bit, and we will, just so everyone will know, we will be loading this program onto Artswell TV. We will hopefully get the slide decks after, and load them on our resources page. And we will be adding all of this information to our resources page. So be looking for that. We'll be pushing that out a lot. Jessie, thank you so much for being so candid and so helpful, and being available. I know you're really crazy right now. Thank you. I'm happy to. And Self-Help just for being so wonderful and such a benefit to our community. So we're glad to have you here.
Thank you. Well, yeah, best of luck. I know it's like drinking water from a fire hose right now. It's hard.
Yep. All right. Thank you. And thanks for everyone for attending.
Okay. Thanks, guys.